Hello. This is the case of the missing digamma. What is a digamma? Good question. It's a strange alphabetical beast, the sixth letter in both the archaic Greek and the archaic Etruscan alphabets. It looks like this. And was pronounced like an English W or V. It survives in the Latin alphabet, which is the one we use, as F. Anyone familiar with Spanish will know that a B is pronounced halfway to V. So the idea of this letter, the digamma, looking like something and being pronounced like something else oughtn't to trip us up too much. Digamma is a relatively modern name for this letter, which under its original guise of war, W-A-W, or VAV, V-A-V, was also the sixth letter in the Coelbren alphabet, shown as a V shape for W. Far from being the red herring or dead end that this might appear, this V-shaped letter is the direct ancestor of the digamma all the way back to the Phoenician alphabet and ultimately to Egyptian hieroglyphs and beyond. It is supremely important because it not only proves that Coelbren's antecedents are ancient, but also because of its shape, which has immense implications. The V shape and pronunciation of the sixth Coelbren letter survive today in the Welsh F, as in Arfon, meaning river, but in only one English word that I can think of, which is of. We do have to bear in mind that according to the Bardas of Iolo Morganwg, the Coelbren alphabet has expanded over time and some letters have changed shape. In addition, different alphabets were used for different purposes. So I've based this on the Coelbren alphabet used by Wilson and Blackett, as I do whenever I talk about the Coelbren. The relatively modern Greek name of digamma stems from the third letter of the Greek alphabet, the gamma, with its single arm. In Welsh, cam means crooked, so the digamma is daw or diw-cam, D-E-U. That's two crookeds or two crooks. And it also survives in Greek numbering systems as 6, suitably enough. In Proto-Canaanite, which is just what Proto-Sinaitic is called when it's in Canaan, woe, W-O, pronounced war, sorry, is a mace. And this brings us neatly to Egypt and Orion and his famous club or mace. In Richard Hinckley Allen's authoritative work Star Names, Their Lore and Meaning, he describes Orion as giant, hunter and warrior. He also usefully tells us that an early rendering of the name Orion was Warion. This was spelt digamma, A-R-I-O-N, and was pronounced something like the English word warrior. Suitably enough, Orion was, as we know, centrally important to the Egyptians, representing Osiris, lord of the underworld, as well as being his home in the afterlife. It's well known now that the pyramids at Giza represent the stars in Orion's belt, and that this is not coincidence is proved not only by the tumps in Gwynedd and Glamorgan, which both show the belt and other stars laid out on the ground, but also by the Thornborough rings in Yorkshire. Orion is famous for his strength, symbolised by his mace or club, and there is some connection also with the storm gods of the East. Tarhun is just one spelling, T-A-R-H-U-N. Now, when I arrived at this part, I thought initially I was going to draw a blank, but with Ross's help I found something quite astonishing. The Welsh word for a fault or a sin is CWL. While Coelbren, CWLBREN, is the word for a bludgeon, and a bludgeon as a noun is quite obviously a club or a mace. I was aware that the Egyptians had a great love for puns, the heavier and the more obvious and leaden, the better. And I wondered if I had stumbled over such a pun, neatly combining not only the Hebrews' original fault or sin which had made their God so angry with them, but also the bludgeon, which seems to symbolise a strength degenerated from the supreme magical moulding abilities of words into mere brute force. The word Colbren is used as an almost homonym for Coilbren, and I wondered, was this somehow the Hebrews' sin that obliged them to create first hieroglyphics and then alphabets wherever they went in order to record their history and identity? Coming a little more up to date, we've seen that the Digamma is linked to the number 6 and to Christ the Phoenix, who rose again. The number 6 was connected to Christ by the heretic Marcus, a 2nd century Gnostic whose system of numbers was considered sound enough to be used by Clement of Alexandria, but without attribution. There is evidence of the Digamma as numeral in its C-shaped form, and a kind of straight-sided C appears in the early Coilbren alphabet. Christ was early on identified with the phoenix, and the colour of the phoenix is red gold. Red gold is the colour of Welsh gold, and Welsh gold is still made into wedding rings for royal brides. Sir Gawain, in his battles with the Green Knight, wore accoutrements of red gold. Wilson and Blackett think that Gawain was Owen, younger brother of Arthur I, and the Green Knight represents Ireland, against which Owen fought strenuously, and I think also lost his life. Phoenix is the botanical name for the date palm, and date palms grow happily in the south of Britain. The date palm also represents the Hebrew letter called Vav, V-A-V, which, according to myjewishlearning.com, channels the divine energy. This is as good a description of Christ as I can find, particularly since the Hebrew letter Vav is the 6th letter in the Hebrew alphabet and is acknowledged as ancestor of the Digamma. This shows Vav, or the Digamma, as a pillar support, which I think is marginally better than some of the other descriptions, one of which is tent peg. And it begs the question, I think, who was the other pillar? We now have to identify, or it would seem we have to identify Christ not only with Orion, but also as one of the twin pillars. And talking of twin pillars, M is the sound of earth, as the Buddhists say, and a capital M is twin pillars supporting the Vav, or abyss, between them. Indeed, an M shape is given as another form of Vav, as is the Phoenician mace shape. We already know that one title of the Egyptian pharaohs was Lord of the Abyss. What these findings seem to be saying is that Lord of the Abyss ought also to be one of Christ's titles. Given what we know of Christ's connection to Britain, perhaps we ought to take more seriously the idea that Britain itself was the land of the Phoenix, Phoenicia, in fact. Is there any more? Well, yes. The pronunciation of Vav, or the Digamma, is also, I think, why the Cockneys, the descendants of the Iceni, used, according to Dickens, to swap their V's and W's in speech. So very became werry. The Digamma went missing from the archaic Greek alphabet in roughly the 8th century BC, which is just when half the Hebrews, half the Cymry, were leaving Anatolia for Italy. This is before the Cymry epic called the Iliad was written down in the 7th century BC. That's when people think it was. This, of course, is open to debate, but it's beginning to fit together nicely. The former presence of the Digamma can be detected in the Iliad in many cases because its omission apparently left the meter defective. For example, the word Vanax, meaning lord or military leader, found in the Iliad, would originally have been spelt not with a W but with a Digamma. Why that should upset the meter, I don't know. Perhaps there are some poets watching this who might be able to tell me. Interestingly, though, Wanax is another name for Poseidon, who founded Atlantis. And the name is also attested in Linear B, which is found on Crete. And Linear B is now known to be linked to Linear A. This connection has only been made very recently, and they've got some way to go, but it's a wonderful start. This links it to Luvian, which, as we know, was spoken at Anatolian Troy. And I don't think it can possibly be coincidence that the digamma disappears from archaic Greek only to turn up in archaic Etruscan at almost exactly the right time. In the area of northeast Scotland known as Buchan, the dialect is called Doric, and in it a W is still pronounced as F. So who becomes far, F-A, what is fit, F-I-T, why is fit Y, and when becomes fan, F-A-N. Whether we gave the word Doric to Greece or brought it back with us is a moot point. There are places all over the United Kingdom with Dor in their names, from Dorchester, Dorset to Castle Dor, a very old hill fort near Foy in Cornwall, which is known to have been inhabited from at least the 5th or 4th century BC. The Castle of Dor, at the extreme southerly tip of the Stoner Spit on the Isle of Thanet, represented, I've put here, with Ebbsfleet, a sturdy defence of the Wonsum Channel, which is where, roughly where Caesar tried his ignominious landings, and this was known for centuries as the doorway to Loiga, England. A door is an old term for a cockchafer which hums very loudly. This is where things get a little bit esoteric. Please bear with me, or skip if you don't like this sort of thing. The door to the psychic realms is through the pineal gland, and anybody who has had an out-of-the-body experience, as I have, will know the humming electrical field the spirit passes through in order to leave the body temporarily and in safety. H.V. Morton's elegiac and exquisite book In Search of England was first published in 1927. It's an account of Morton's ramble through England from London to Cornwall with a dash to Gretna Green before he heads south again. On the salt flats of the Norfolk coast, near a place which I shall spell first, Stiffkey, he falls into conversation with one of the last cockle women, and he learns, among other things, that Stiffkey is not pronounced stiff key, it's pronounced Stewkey, which seems to me, again, to be evidence of the digamma, or at least its former presence. This, with the evidence from northeast Aberdeenshire and the Colburn alphabet, shows, I think, that the 6th letter, Vav, Wow, digamma, call it what you will, has been alive and well in these islands for a very long time, although goodness knows whether the pronunciation came first and was exported, or whether we merely brought it home again dressed in an alphabet. I don't know. Perhaps it was both. For what it's worth, I was going to entitle this video The Digamma, Wow, but it seemed a little facile. That is, until I discovered that wow, W-O-W, as an expression of surprise or wonder, is very much older than we thought it was. As the online etymology dictionary puts it, it stems from the 1510s, Scottish, a natural expression of amazement. My Scots dialect dictionary, to finish with, tells me that it is also spelt W-A-W, just like the digamma. Thank you.